Pulitzer Prize-winning author Wallace Stegner is most associated with the American West. But near the beginning of his final novel, he writes of standing on a hill, quote, "below me the unchanged village, the lake like a pool of mercury, the varying greens of hayfields and meadows and sugarbush and black spruce woods." Stegner was describing Greensboro, where he spent a half-century of summers. His book, Crossing to Safety, takes its title from a Robert Frost poem. It's a moving meditation on friendship, marriage, and mortality set in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom. VPR's Sarah Ashworth visited Greensboro and talked with those who remember him.
Near the top of a winding dirt road near Caspian Lake, there's a slight fork in the road. To the right, nailed into a tree, hangs a lopsided piece of wood with the name Stegner scrawled on it. The turnoff leads to the log home of Page Stegner, the son of writer Wallace Stegner. He built his home out of red pines he and his father planted 40 years earlier.
You grew it, or we grew it. And my father, helped me with it a lot when we were putting it up and building it. Yeah, a lot of memories here.
Page Stegner first came to Vermont with his parents when he was 6 months old, and more than 70 years later, he still returns each summer. It's an impulse he and his father shared.
I don't know that we talked about it a lot. I know that my father particularly, he found a lot of the values that he grew up with in Saskatchewan and the West embedded in rural Vermont. Self-sufficient, somewhat taciturn, non-complaining, the Vermonter. And that appealed to him a great deal, but also just the terrain, so lovely, so beautiful.
Page Stegner says that landscape inspired his father, who would diligently begin writing each morning at 8. After Stegner's death in a 1993 car accident in New Mexico, his remains were returned to Vermont.
His ashes are scattered here on Baker Hill, which is where he wanted them. And that completely flummoxes most of the Westerners. Why would he do that? Well, I don't really know, but I think, part of it's in what I said about his affection for the character of the people.
People Stegner wrote about on more than one occasion. His first fictional take on Greensboro was 1947's Second Growth. Many townspeople took offense to his characterization of them as aloof, and the Stegners stayed away for the next few summers. But in Stegner's other Greensboro-based book, Crossing to Safety, he focused on just one family in town.
Well, my name is Clive Gray. We're sitting on a porch overlooking Caspian Lake, and my family first came here in 1910. My grandfather built a house in 1912 or 13, and it's been the family's summer home ever since then.
Gray's parents, Phil and Peg, are the reason the Stegners came to Vermont in the first place. Phil Gray and Wallace Stegner taught English together at the University of Wisconsin. The Grays summered in Vermont, and in the late 1930s, Wallace Stegner and his wife Mary came to visit.
I can remember them coming in that door while my family was having dinner before the war, and you could see the affection that the two couples felt for each other. They had just arrived from Wisconsin, and it was a very good feeling.
More than 50 years later, Stegner chronicled the two couples' long friendship in Crossing to Safety.
This is the one that he inscribed personally. It says, "For Clive Gray, on the 50th anniversary of the conjunction of our families, affectionately as always, Wallace Stegner, Greensboro, August 27, 1987.
Gray remembers Stegner as a kind, elegant man with a John Wayne face. And he says when Crossing to Safety was published, townspeople were delighted to have the book set in their town.
I just remember Wallace Stegner being in the small dining room by the garden.
That's Wilhelmina Smith. She runs Greensboro's Highland Lodge with her husband. The inn's gift shop sells copies of Crossing to Safety, and Smith says they often have guests who stay at the inn because of Stegner. Smith's closest contact with the writer was when she and other members of the Greensboro Historical Society asked him to pen the foreword to the town's history.
It's about his sense of place, which is the theme of many of his books, because he was always a wanderer as a child. coming to Greensboro was his home where he could always come back to.
Wallace Stegner's last summer in Vermont was in 1992, meaning he spent the better part of more than 50 summers in the Green Mountains. And today his son Paige Stegner says he plans to do the same.
You know, my parents came here, I came here, my daughter is now here. It just gets in your blood, I guess.
And also continuing the tradition of writing. Paige Stegner spent the better part of this past summer scratching away at his own novel, also set in Greensboro. For VPR News, I'm Sarah Ashworth.
Paige Stegner also just finished sorting through his father's many years of correspondence with friends and colleagues, and a selection of those letters was published this past fall.